Jessica, that was for you. All right. Well, I'm Dr. Yvette Roubideaux. I'm the director of the Policy Research Center at the National Congress of American Indians. And I'm joined by our team today for this workshop. Our first speaker, she won't come up yet, but she's Dr. Julie Lucero, assistant professor in the School of Community Health Sciences at the University of Nevada, Reno. Anyway, yay. We have Amber Emerson, who, as we speak, is earning her Master's of Public Health at the University of Nevada, Reno. Congratulations, Amber. Yay. Whitney Sani, who's a communications associate at the National Congress of American Indians. And David Burrell, who's CEO and founder of Future IQ, who served as a consultant to the NCAI Policy Research Center to help develop the Tribal Research Futures game. So thank you so much, David. I also want to acknowledge former team members Malia Villegas, Deanna Aroundham, and Sarah Patowski for their help in developing these tools all along the way. So the title of the workshop today is Tribal Research Futures, Resources to Strengthen Governance, Trust, and Culture in Research Partnerships. And during this workshop, we're featuring components of a new toolkit that's designed to help strengthen tribal academic research partnerships. I think you've learned at the conference how important those partnerships are, but how challenging they can be as well. So this work is sponsored by 2 grants. The first is our IHS NIH-funded Arch grant, and also our NIDBK-funded Center for Diabetes Translation Research grant at Washington University at St. Louis. I hope you've gotten a chance to meet Ali Fad, who's here from St. Louis. All right, hey. So there's 2 things we're going to do today. First, we're giving an overview of the new resource guide entitled Holding Space, a guide for tribal partners and a guide for partners in tribal research. And then we're actually going to spend most of the time today playing the new Tribal Research Future game that will show how governance, trust, and culture helps partners navigate challenges in research partnerships. So we really hope you're excited to be a part of this official launch and of these new resources available for tribal academic partnerships. And I also hope you don't mind if we take a couple of pictures. We might tweet out a picture or 2. If you don't want your picture taken, just let Amber know. She'll be coming around to pick up your evaluations, but let her know if you don't want us to take your picture. That'd be great. But you want to be famous. You were at the launch, right? You were there. You're here. All right. So now I would like to introduce our first speaker, and that's Dr. Julie Lucero. She is an assistant professor in the School of Community Health Sciences at the University of Nevada, Reno. She serves as a co-principal investigator on the Arch7 project, which aims to support research partnerships to improve American and Alaska Native community health. She has a master's in public health and a PhD in health communication from the University of New Mexico. And for those just coming, come on up forward to the desks. So anyway, I am so grateful to have Julie on this team. She is a national expert in community-based participatory research, and she's one of the brightest people I know, and she is really committed and dedicated to this work, and I'm so grateful she's going to be presenting this work to you today. So, Dr. Lucero.
Thank you, Yvette. I don't know that I'm going to be able to live up to all of that, but I will try. So thank you all for being here. I know that just like Yvette said, this has been a long conference and you have all stayed until the very end. I really want to thank KRCA for supporting us over the years. They have hosted a couple of trainings. We were here last year trying to figure out some of the game elements that you're going to be experiencing today. So KRCA has really supported us over the last 5 years. So today what I'm going to do is I am going to give you an overview of the Tribal Holding Space, the toolkit to strengthen tribal academic partnerships. And, oops, I'm having the same problem. Here we go. So this is going to be the agenda for my section. I'm only going to take about 40 minutes out of your time before we get to the game. But this 40 minutes is going to provide you the overview of how this project got started, how the toolkit came to be, and how the game came to be. So it sort of will set you up for playing the game. So we're going to go over the toolkit, which has two components, the discussion guide, and the discussion guide covers governance, trust, and culture. And then, I see, this is why this monitor is here, so that I don't have to keep looking at the screen. Okay, and then the research futures game. So you're going to experience the game, and then we're going to have time to debrief on it. So very quickly, we are a partnership. The Arch7 partnership is a partnership between the National Congress of American Indians, the National Congress of American Indians Policy Research Center, and the University of Nevada, Reno. Prior to being at the University of Nevada, Reno, I was at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine, where this project got started, and that has the history, the previous grant, the Arch7 Grant, Research for Improved Health, that helped us set up the components for this game and the toolkit. So Arch7 was a partnership that lasted between 2009 and 2013. It was a partnership between the National Congress of American Indians Policy Research Center, the University of New Mexico, and the University of Washington. And what that grant set out to do was understand the facilitators and barriers to community-based participatory research. And for those of you that may not be familiar with that term, we've heard it a lot today, but really it's a relationship between communities and academics to improve, in this case, research, health research. And so it brings community knowledge with scientific knowledge, blends them together. It democratizes research in its most ideal state, but it's not easy and it takes a lot of time because it's relational. So we wanted to figure out what were the facilitators and barriers to CBPR. So the way that we did that is we had a mixed method strategy, and in the quantitative strategy, we recruited 318 partnerships from around the country. And our universe of CBPR partnerships came from the NIH Reporter, which is a database of NIH-funded research projects. And we scoured the database looking for partnerships that identify themselves as using CBPR, some sort of community engagement. And so that resulted in 318 partnerships. That was a 60% response rate from what we had seen, or what the universe had told us how many partnerships were out there. And it resulted in an N of 450 individuals. In addition to that, we had a qualitative strategy, which was 5 in-depth case studies. And when we went to these case studies, we asked to see manuscripts, we asked to see any sort of policy documents, we attended meetings and did observations, we did focus groups and interviews, so we had a lot of qualitative data. And so between both the qualitative and quantitative strategies, we were able to see the complementarity between our data sources and really identify the breadth and depth of what successes and or facilitators and barriers to this kind of research were. So as you can imagine, we had lots of data, lots of outcomes, lots of things to sift through. But what we found is that, at least from more of an observational point of view, National Congress of American Indians and the University of New Mexico, we saw from our observation that really the foundations were governance, trust, and culture. But of course, you can't just say, well, I think this is what's working, right? You need scientific proof. So there was, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this table because it's a simplified multiple logistic regression model. And the reason that I simplified it is because I don't want to get caught up in the numbers, but I'll tell you that everything here is statistically significant at 0.05 or lower. And so there were 14 characteristics that were shown to be associated with these outcomes, with these intermediate outcomes. The intermediate outcomes are across the top here, so synergy, personal outcomes, agency outcomes, power relationships, sustainability, community health, community change, and that was a result of policy or things that were really tangible changes in the community. Community health, and then all of that came together into one variable that we labeled overall outcomes. Now, there were 14 variables that were associated with all of these different outcomes, but these are the ones that were related with governance. So governance is resource sharing and written agreements. And you can see the ones that it is statistically significant with. So the relationship was a positive association. And then here, trust was positively associated with synergy, agency outcomes, power relationships, sustainability, and then culture with synergy, power relationships, and sustainability. So for us, we said this is evidence that trust, governance, and culture are really foundational to tribal academic partnerships. Hence, our toolkit, these are the elements of the toolkit that we've decided to focus on. So the next step was to apply for a new grant, and that was the Arch7 Grant, which was, the purpose was to disseminate within and support American Indian Alaska Native communities in CBPR partnerships to implement best practices learned from research. And so those are the three cross-cutting themes of governance, trust, and culture. And then we also wanted to inform and improve the quality of AIAN health disparities research. And so that was then to promote genuine tribal academic partnerships. And you heard that all today and yesterday, right, about the importance of engaging communities in a authentic, genuine relationship. So the discussion guide then covers governance, and some of the content within that governance chapter are resource sharing, capacity building and enhancing, and ethical stewardship. In trust, it's transparency, open communication, power balances, conflict negotiation, and alignment of values. And then in the culture module, we have topics of relevance, a research topic, roles of engagement, and cultural safety and humility. So now I'll go through some of the content that we have in each of these modules. But first, what I'd like to do is invite Yvette and Amber up here, and they're going to play out a vignette. And we're going to use this vignette through the rest of the presentation to sort of ground us in what we're talking about.
Yeah. Try and find us. Okay. All right. Can you guys hear us? Okay. Okay. Oh. Hey, it's so good to see you. It's been so long since our last meeting. There's been something that I want to talk to you about. Last week I was at a research conference and I presented on our project. And what I found, I learned about a project that incorporated sweats in a curriculum component of activity, and it was said to be a promising practice with Native youth.
Well, I'm a busy tribal leader, so, I'm thinking about this. I don't even really remember that you were going to do a presentation. Do you mind sharing that with me?
Of course. Sorry, I forgot. I know that you're super busy, and I didn't want to add any more to your plate. Anyway, point being, I really think this could be something that would really benefit the kids.
So, where was the project taking place?
I think it was the Sioux.
Okay, well, you know that there's many Sioux nations, right? Well, either way, we're not all the same here. We don't all use sweats as a part of our ceremonies, and I thought you might have learned that over the past 7 years of working with us.
Wow, I'm so sorry. I just thought it sounded like a good way to incorporate some more culture into our project.
Okay, well, maybe a good place to start would be with the Community Advisory Group.
And NC, right? So I expect that for those of you that are doing work in tribal communities, elements of this vignette are familiar. you've had somebody step over the threshold of the partnership. They've exerted a little bit more independence than you would have liked. They're representing your community on your behalf. They forget to go to the advisory board. They forget the timelines and the process, get a little bit too comfortable with where they're at in your relationship, right? All of these things impact the partnership, and we know that these relationships can be very fragile. And so this guide then is developed in a way to sort of have those conversations up front, or ongoing conversations ideally, so that everybody knows what their roles are and they don't forget that. So think about this vignette as we go through the rest of these, and I'll provide touchstones so that we don't forget where we're at. But in governance, within the toolkit, and actually the way that we think about governance, we tend to think about it in terms of regulations. And that's not necessarily the only thing that happens, what that governance covers. It also covers decision-making. And we know that within these tribal academic partnerships, there are and in any research partnership, there are decision points all along the way, from the very beginning of who are you going to partner with, to the very end of how you're going to disseminate the data or the information. And so some of the key questions are, does governance take place only during the moment when tribal council decides to approve or not approve the research proposal? And so there's a series of questions really to ask yourself, when is governance taking place within our partnership? The other aspect of governance is stewardship. And as academics, we tend to see tribal IRB or other IRB besides the university IRB as a burden. It's just one more issue that we have to deal with, one more hoop that we have to jump through, one more approval that we have to get. But what we fail to realize is that the IRBs that are required of us beyond our universities, that's where governance fits in. That's where stewardship fits in. Stewardship then is a balance between benefit and harm, or benefit and risk. And that is something that at the tribal community, that's their responsibility to make sure that the research is benefiting and not harming, even though a university may have already approved the research. There's a different lens to look through. And so what we're trying to promote is this shift in knowledge, not a shift in perception, but a shift in knowledge to know that the university is not the end-all be-all of ethical guidelines and approvals, but rather to know that the community has the stewardship, right? They have the best interest of the community in mind. So we need to find this balance when we're talking about formal approvals. And then governance is stewardship. So here we're trying to figure out really who is responsible, who decides, who benefits, and what and who is at risk. From my perspective as a university academic, the risk may not be I may not think about risks that the community knows are risks. And so to have that conversation and to promote that responsible stewardship that manages risk and ensures benefits for the community partners and the project as a whole. Now, trust in tribal research, this is my area of study. I am a trust researcher. I think everything comes down to trust. So here, this is a quote out of Walk Softly, Listen Carefully. This was a document that was published and authored by the National Congress of American Indians in collaboration with Montana State University. And I just want to highlight or read out this highlighted area. And this participant said, many Native people are weary of research and do not trust researchers, the academic institutions they represent, and or the funding agencies. And this is probably largely because of historical experiences, right? The history of opportunistic research. And unfortunately, or fortunately, right, because there's a healthy amount of suspicion in every relationship, there is a legacy that comes with university research. And as academics, we bear that legacy, whether we like it or not. And so it's up to us to make that change from here into the future. So trust construction, the way that we often think about trust is it's either yes or no. You either trust somebody or you don't. Well, it's much more complicated than that, right? Think about any relationship that you're in, and can you identify the shift between no and yes? Probably not, because it takes a really long time to go from no to yes. And so what we've conceptualized is there's all of these types or these phases that happen in between. And even though right here it's pictured as a linear progression, it's not. You can jump from one to the other to the other. And so there is this no to no trust, and then this unearned trust. This is something that is conceptualized as maybe a patient-provider interaction, because the role that they have, the information that they have, the education they have, provides them a certain amount of skill that gives them trust automatically. And then neutral trust, functional trust is characterized by having an agreement in place, and so your relationship is going to be based on this agreement, and then once that relationship is done or that agreement is done, then you might go your separate ways. Trust by proxy, I'm sure everybody in here can relate to this. It's a relationship or a trust that you have because somebody that you trust knows somebody, and therefore you trust that somebody, right? And that's often the way these relationships start out, that these tribal or community academic partnerships or tribal academic partnerships. And then critical reflective trust is, just the ideal form of trust, where you know that the person that you're with or the person that you have a relationship with really has your back. This is, I'm sure you all have heard this, and I hope this isn't inappropriate, but it's the idea of, or that saying where a friend is a good friend when you can call them when you're in jail, but you know a friend is a really super good friend when they're with you in jail, right? So this is critical reflective trust. So this is characterized by, suspicion, mistrust. And like I said earlier, there's always a certain amount of suspicion. It should always be there. We should never try to get rid of the healthy amount of suspicion. And then the other thing in this chapter is monitoring your conflict style. So any relationship, there's conflict, right? It's inherent in relational partnerships. It's going to happen, and so you might as well prepare for it at the outset. And so knowing your conflict style is one way to get started. So, and this is, it varies. We have in the toolkit a sort of a survey so that you can assess your conflict style. And when I do mine, I'm compromising when I'm thinking about partnerships. When I do mine in my personal relationship, I'm more competitive. And I think my husband would agree to that. So it varies, right, and where it is that you're at. But knowing how you fight can help you figure out what you need to do to fight fairer. And then the last module that we talk about, or that's in the toolkit, in the guide, is culture. And as humans, we are cultural bearing, cultural making, and cultural sharing beings. And culture lives and breathes in everything that we do, right? Who your family is, where you live, what technology you use. Culture is in everything that we do. So it's not just in the pictures or the food or the clothes that we wear, right? It's in everything. So that's what this mutual constitution of cultures and selves tells us. And so we have a lot of exercises about culture to identify where you are coming from, what your standpoint is, and what is the standpoint of your partner, of your research partner, so that you better understand each other, so that you can move forward in a very good way. And this is also refers to academic culture, because there is a clear culture within academics that we cannot deny. And then we talk about cultural humility in research. And there's a lot of discussion out there, these national conversations about what is the best way to go, right? Is it cultural competence? Is it cultural safety? Is it cultural humility? Whichever one works best for you is a really good start. So we've chosen to use cultural humility. And the principles are lifelong learning and critical self-reflection, recognizing and challenging power imbalances, and providing mutually beneficial relationships. This is very similar to the 3 R's that Dr. Boyer mentioned earlier in his research institution. And then, so partner relationships. Here are some questions to ask about cultural humility. What do you know about your research partner? What are the benefits of partnering? What are the costs or risks of partnering? And costs is associated with all resources, not just monetary. And then what does it mean to be culturally safe in the context of the research project? I have a really loud voice, so I don't think I need this anyways.
For the Skype, though.
Oh, did I turn it off then? Oh, there it is. So what does it mean to be culturally safe in the context of research? And this is really where trust and culture come together. In order for somebody to feel that they have the ability to talk and to provide advice, if it's a community advisory board member, or if you have them more active in the research process, they have to feel as if they're being respected and they're being heard, and the information that they provide isn't going to be taken out of the way that it's intended for. So, right, that's cultural safety. So the ideal path of the research partnership from our perspective is developing this partnership synergy that leads to respecting culture, building capacity, building agency capacity, changing power relationships, and sustainability. So in this vignette, I want to come back to this, the issues of culture. So this is actually a real thing. So when I've been partnering with somebody from one of the Southwest tribes, and I've been working with him for maybe 10 years now. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I actually understood what was going on. So I felt like we had a good relationship. From my cultural perspective, giving a hug was, hi, it's nice to see you, give you a hug. And for him, it was appropriate for him to give me a handshake first and then give me a hug. So we would do that. If you notice that beginning of that vignette, it was go in for the hug, boy, somebody's doing this number, and it was really awkward. And so that's a very basic thing of culture, right? That's a very basic expression of it. But it took me a while to understand what's going on here. I know this guy, right? Like, why isn't he hugging me? So there's that cultural piece. And then the decision-making or governance really came in when the academic didn't tell or didn't inform the community that they were going to be doing a presentation, right? There should have been representation from all sides. And then the cultural piece again, it shouldn't have been up to the academic to say, let's do sweats, right? Even though it was in the best intentions, it should have been, what is culturally appropriate for this community to the pieces of culture that we can then embed within the intervention. And then making the decisions or forgetting about the community advisory board. This is also an issue with community advisory boards, right? Advisory is in the title. So if you're only going or seeking advice, but then not really doing anything about it, where's the genuine relationship within that situation, that space? So that was just to bring us back to the vignette. And all of this taken together, we're hoping then transforms community and improves community health overall. Now, it's not this simple, right? There's a lot of other factors that are going into it, but this is a really good starting point. And so I hope that you will see this as you're playing the game and will understand where it is that we're coming from. And so right now, this is our contact information. That was just to provide you a brief overview with where the concepts from the toolkit are coming from. And it was Sarah Patelski, actually, who had the brilliant idea of creating this game. And so David has brought us through full circle through the development, the focus groups, and then now we are ready to launch. And if you have any questions, I am happy to answer.